All right. So excited. So excited. Yeah, thank you, Davey. So excited today to talk about issues 5 and 6. So this is Rorschach Central. We're finally getting into Rorschach. Last Watchmen Club, we did Dr. Manhattan, which was amazing. I love Dr. Manhattan. But, and as ethereal and weird as Dr. Manhattan's story is, I think that we can all agree that Rorschach's story is really fucking weird too, man. It's just so, in its own Rorschach way, it's so perfect. I have so many feels about it. So let's do a overview. Let's start with a recap of issue number 5. So in issue 5, we follow Rorschach as he pays a call to further investigate/intimidate ex-costumed villain Moloch. Elsewhere, the police investigate the tragic death of 2 children at the hands of their father, who ended up committing suicide right after. Back at the newsstand, we get more tales from the Black Freighter. And also we get a new location in this issue, Gunga Diner, where we have Dan and Lori meet for lunch. And later, Rorschach shows up in disguise as himself, where he waits and watches a trash can/information drop. There's an assassination attempt on Adrian Veidt, and the killer dies before he can be questioned by police. Lori takes Dan up on his offer to stay at his place. Rorschach, receiving a note from Moloch in the trash, goes to meet him at his apartment, only to find himself in a trap. And with Moloch dead and the police outside, Rorschach is captured and finally unmasked. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about today is the blinking light artistic choice that's going on in this. I want to talk a little bit about this blinking light. Let's go to Cam 2 for our book here. So it immediately starts. You know, you see in the 9-panel grid that we talked about a few issues ago. Now we have, it's like red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. And it's like, at first I was like kind of confused by it. It did take me a second to realize like what was going on. But then I realized, I was like, oh, he's got that blinking light like outside of his, this is the blinking light that you see flashing in the puddle, like outside of his apartment. And that's why you have these like red and blue little deals. But like, I think they just look so great. Like, it gives it such a cinematic feel that I'm just like super into. And in fact, we saw this a few chapters ago with the chapter issue 2, where we had the comedian, like Moloch was remembering his last time talking to the comedian. And we had the same thing here. So, yeah, it's like I didn't really realize it too. I just totally missed it. Like, I didn't even think about it. Like, how crazy is that? Like, you're reading a comic and you see all this crazy color change, and I'm just like, just accepting it and going on because I was so involved in the story. Like, anyways, so just wanted to point that out to you guys. I think it's so cinematic. I totally see why they made this into a movie. I mean, it's the comic itself is so great, and it's such a cool pace. I think it's super nifty. And then, okay, so moving on. So we need to talk about Moloch a little bit, all right? So that's like a loaded name, okay? Moloch. That is a super loaded name to name a villain. He's an ex-villain. He kind of looks like kind of creepy, super old. Kind of looks like a vampire a little bit. I love his like little face. Actually, let me just go back to this cam book here. I love this little face. Oh my god, like he's so cute. Like Moloch is so precious. Like, I don't know, I really like his goofy face. I love the way that Gibbons draws him. But okay, so Moloch is a Canaanite deity. This is ancient Canaanite deity in our world, in our real world. And he was kind of like this bull god or something like that, and like people would like sacrifice children to him. And Moloch also has ties to Kronos, who is a Greek titan, who is like the father of like Zeus and all the gods. He ate his own children. So that guy, like Kronos, like eats his own children. So Moloch is kind of like this eater of children. But symbolically, the term Moloch is meant as, you know, something or someone who requires a sacrifice, a deer sacrifice, you know, like not just any sacrifice, like a child, you know, it's like it's pretty intense, a very costly sacrifice. And also it's really interesting because in this issue, we have, so we're talking about Moloch. Moloch is, you know, first dude in the issue here. Next up, after we see Rorschach with Moloch, we have this scene, this new crime scene. It's completely unrelated, seemingly. And a father has killed his kids, and these policemen who are investigating Edward Blake's stuff, they're in here investigating. And, I mean, that's like a father, you know, killing his children and then killing himself. It's like, it's very Molochian, I guess you could say, or Chronosian. So you have this, which is like, it's just like an indicator of like what's happening. Like when these sorts of things happen, like I love how Alan Moore is showing like senseless tragedies like this. It seems like a senseless tragedy, but really like it's coming from this very specific energy that's in the idea sphere right now that subconsciously everybody is picking up on in this universe. So yeah, and then also, okay, last thing about Moloch is, so Moloch is essentially the gateway who takes Rorschach into oblivion in the end of this, you know, because Moloch was one of the original villains. And Rorschach is like second generation hero guy. So in a way, you know, like Rorschach is like a son to him. Like he's second generation to Moloch's people and Moloch's generation. And it's funny, like when he goes, like when Rorschach goes to check him out and he gets that little sign and he's like going back over there and he starts talking to him. And the last thing he says to him, Rorschach says to him before he figures out that he's dead, is maybe you can enlighten me. So he goes to Moloch's apartment for enlightenment, you know? And it's like, that's so good. That's just like so symbolic on so many levels, because that's where Rorschach would go. Moloch is oblivion, you know? Like that, like he's a symbol of like oblivion. And of course, Rorschach would end up there. You know, he's kind of like this diametrically opposed path from like Dr. Manhattan, you know, where Dr. Manhattan is just like, oh, like he became God, you know, and like this guy's just like on the ground, in the dirt, in the trash, you know. I mean, he leaves his costume in the trash. He's a rat, you know, and he's like accepts it. He's like, I'm a human and humans are rat pieces of shit, you know, and it's just like, and so of course this guy would be led to fucking oblivion, right? But Moloch is like the perfect symbol. And then he's dead, you know, and he's got the circle in his head, which is also like an Indian symbol. And we're gonna get into that in just a second, by the way. We're gonna talk about all the symbols. I saw a lot of you guys talking about those triangles. I noticed the triangles too. We'll talk about the triangles. Thank you, Kuzun, for the top cheer. Okay, so, all right. Oh, also. So, okay, so he goes to Moloch. He's been framed, you know, and so he's sacrificed. He is sacrificed, Rorschach, into the jaws of institutionalized justice, you know, which is something he's also diametrically opposed to. Like this whole issue in particular is just like, it's so brilliant because it's called fearful symmetry, you know, and I saw somebody saying like on Patreon that it's like, that's so on the nose, but I mean, I love it. Like, I love it that like in this issue, we are shown so many different dualities of how like Rorschach is duality of like all the other characters, you know, how he reflects all of them and they reflect each other. And like when you start fucking with reflection in art, I think that things get really magical really fast. And I feel like this issue in particular is just firing on all cylinders. It's so good. Like, it's so good. Because, yeah, Dr. Manhattan is just like the highest, you know? He's becoming God. And this guy's like, becoming trash. It's perfect. Anyways, but also, like, okay, so Rorschach is also diametrically opposed. Maybe it's not, I don't know. He's also the cops, him and the cops, okay? Like, they both have the same goal, which is justice, and to be this karmic balancer, okay? Karmic balancer, that's what Rorschach is, and that's what the police are trying to be, or as an institution try to be. And except he's one man, instead of he's like a bunch of dudes. He's like one guy. And he does it his own way, and his own way is really fucked up, and it's not by the book, and it's up to him to judge each thing like as it comes. Whereas cops have rules. The whole thing is like built on all of these rules. It's this bureaucratic structure, and like the thing about Rorschach is that he is chaos. You know, he's like a chaos being, And so he can't, like, and if he wants to affect change and he wants to be a good guy, and he wants to funnel all of his fucked up urges into trying to be a hero so that he doesn't become a villain, that's awesome. But, like, of course the police aren't going to like him because he can't do it in a structured way. Like, he can't work in that system, you know, which I totally get. I feel like I don't work in a system. I don't work in a system very well at all. So that's why I have to, like, you know, be my own boss because I'm a crazy person. So yeah, I love all of it. And then the cops finally get him, you know, it's like they finally get him. And I love the very last deal, like the very last thing in here. It says, everything balances. The cops, as they drag him away, everything balances. And it's just like so true, you know. This whole thing is about like this. It's such the circle and the triangle. It's way too good. And the thing I love most when Rorschach gets caught is that his vanity is exposed. So this man who accepts being trash, you know, he accepts being trash, and he's just like, I'm a trash person. I'm gross. He's short, and even he has a little bit of vanity. So when he's Rorschach, he wants to be more intimidating. Like, I get why he's wearing lifts in his shoes, because I know a lot of women who, I mean, I don't feel the need to wear heels to be more imposing. I feel like I'm imposing enough at my height. But I know girls that are shorter and they feel like they don't get respect because they're shorter, and they wear heels around because they get respect when they're taller, you know? And so it's totally a tactic that works. It's totally a tactic. Like, if you're going to be a tough guy on the street and beating up people, you need to be as imposing as possible. Totally wear the lifts. But at the same time, it does also expose that Rorschach has a little bit of vanity. And even though he considers himself the man on the street, where he's like, I'm on the street, I'm the most street of all these motherfuckers, you know, I'm the most street of all the other heroes, you know, he still doesn't have his feet completely planted on the ground. You know, his heels up in the air. He's not touching the floor. Like, he's like, says he's on the street, but there's a part of him that isn't. And I think that's so human, and that's so beautiful, and I think that's what's really cool about this character. I mean, he's crazy as hell, but he's a lot of fun. And so, okay. So in the end, we go to this nice little piece of poetry here from William Blake. It says, Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? So that is like a super famous poem. That's so loaded too. God, there's so many fucking loaded poem things in this. It's like insane. Like, it's like trying to write an outline for this. I was just like, it was like destroying my brain. You know, it's just like, there's so much to say. Like, you can just go in so many different directions with this. So William Blake was a poet, and not only was a poet, he was an initiate into like occult brotherhood societies. I'm not sure if he was a part of like the Rosicrucians, or if he was a part of the Golden Dawn, or like some of those things overlap. Like, there was some stuff going on. Anyways, this guy's like a super esoteric artist, okay? Like, his poems and his artwork are very loaded with symbolism. He knows exactly what he's doing. And this particular poem is called Tiger, Tiger, or I think maybe just the Tiger. And it comes from a book of poems called, like, Poems from Experience or something, like something, I totally forgot because I'm an asshole, but there's another book of these poems, and it's like, Poems of Innocence. So he has a book of like Poems of Experience and Poems of Innocence. And the Tiger, Tiger is an experience, and it's talking about the hunter, the predator, that like, okay, so you have this God, we have a creator, you know, something created all of us, and the same man who created the lamb also created the tiger. And like, the tiger's insane, like, it's like a killing machine, like, it's like, and that killing machine like is also made by God. It is not a villain, you know. And that's one thing, like, William Blake's philosophies was very much about getting past dualities, and recognizing like the shadow and integrating, you know, as one, and seeing like living past duality, you know, like defining yourself as one or defining yourself as the other. That was one of his great goals. So it's perfect that, you know, you have Rorschach, who's also, he's a wild animal. This guy's a wild fucking animal. Nobody can stop him. He does whatever he wants. He's chaos. He breaks people's fingers. He kills people. He gets away with it. He's just like totally lives this shit. Like, he is so fucking bonkers, you know? Like, he is a predator. And the thing is that he can't help but be a predator. You know? He can't help it. Like, that just is what he is. And that's something that we're going to go into more in the next issue, going back into that whole thing. But the thing, another duality in this issue that I noticed, everything is, it's so good. Him and Dan, Rorschach and Dan are dual opposites, you know? Rorschach is like poor Batman who's like crazy. And then you have Night Owl, who's like tech Batman, who's like hero Batman, you know? So they're but they're both Batmen. And they both work together, and they're both night people, you know? I mean, and like, he's an owl. Rorschach, I consider Rorschach a rat. He doesn't identify as a rat, but I'm identifying him as a rat. I think those two, like, are, I don't know, it makes sense that they have a similar thing going on. They have a similar, like, wisdom attached to them. Those animals have a similar kind of craftiness and wisdom about them. So it makes sense that they'd be working together. And in this, okay, so Rorschach, okay, here is some pages that I just can't stop with. It's just like, oh my God, you guys, you're killing me. This is so amazing. All right. I love these two pages. These, I think, was my favorite, these two pages in this issue. Because we have, on the one side, this is all Rorschach, and on the other side, we have Dan. Okay, so these are two different guys. They used to both, you know, be costumed hero vigilantes. They worked together at night. One of them gave up. One of them kept going, you know. And so now, right, in this middle sequence, it's like you see him and he's like, oh, he's found his hat and he's putting his gloves on, his spotless gloves, his trash spotless gloves, you know. And behind, there's like this nostalgia poster. And there's a woman, you know, it's like, oh, the sexy woman. And like Dan is experiencing at the same time across town, Dan is experiencing, you know, a woman over here that he's looking at, you know, and both of these men are experiencing desire, but different types of desire. Like Rorschach has the desire to be free of desire, you know, like he desires to be free of desire, but he still is trapped in that karmic loop because he desires, you know, like he can't get past that last one. Whereas I feel like Dan is, you know, he's accepted being a man. He hung up his tights. He's a man, and a man desires woman. I mean, that's pretty simple. Like, dudes like chicks, you know? So he's into this. And I think it's awesome that Rorschach is like, he worships the ideal instead of the woman, you know? Whereas Dan worships the woman as an ideal. But they're equal and opposite at the same time, and it's just brilliant. They're both compelled by primal desire, and a part of this primal desire is to believe in ideas. You know, like this whole thing is like, this whole issue is talking about beliefs, believing in ideas. It's so like hardcore. So let's go over to, okay. So we gotta talk about the triangles. We have to talk about the triangles. In fact, let me just tell you before we start this. So, you know, I've been a little broken out lately. It's fine, it happens, you know, I'm a human. And it hurts my ego though. But I've had like a perfect like triangle, you know, like I had like a spot here and a spot here and a spot here. And I was like reading these issues and I'm like thinking about all these triangles, and then I realized like I have like a triangle on my face. Like this comic is like, I feel like somehow the comic has manifested a triangle of pimples on my face. And actually last night on Instagram, I drew in the middle of the night, I just like drew the triangle around it. And some people were like, Illuminati confirmed, you know, and I was like, yes, but it's my own Illuminati and I'm the only member of it and I'm the only one who believes in it. Okay, so I know that's super off topic, but I just wanted to get you guys it's going to get weird, okay? So I'm going to start this whole thing off by talking about people subscribe to ideas, We all subscribe to ideas. People, the characters in this comic book subscribe to ideas. I subscribe to ideas. You subscribe to ideas. You subscribe to the idea of my channel, you know? I mean, it's like we're doing this shit all the time. But we also, you know, we think about, okay, you subscribe online or you follow someone. Okay, that's like a physical representation of that. But like we do that all the time with ideals, religion, philosophy. You can subscribe to news. You could subscribe to comics. You can subscribe to working for a company and being a company man and believing in that company. You could subscribe to the idea of your sexual orientation, and you can identify that way. There's so many different ways and so many different ideas that people subscribe to. And I think that this was beautifully represented, like this idea was beautifully represented by all of the posters with the triangles we see throughout this issue. There's so many posters with triangles, it's like makes me just, it sets me on fire. Let's go back to the book cam, guys, and let's like really get into this. This is some weird shit. Okay, this was like driving me nuts. I was like thinking about all of it, and it was just like, you know, it just leads you in circles. It's duality, it's just reflections of reflections, you know. Okay, so, I mean, obviously, this guy is flashed first, the R&R, which is also like Rorschach. That looks like Rorschach's sign, his signature, which we see later on. But it's also like this, I can't remember the name of it. It's like a bar, something bar. But you have this symmetry right here, and then it like makes a little skull, you know, if you want to see it fucking hanging out. But then over here, okay, so there's a lot of yellow faces in this, obviously. I mean, there's the yellow face of this, the smiley pin, you know, motif is everywhere. The clock face, the nuclear warning radiation symbol. And then here we have the sun, you know, and also if you notice it has the blood stain, just like the smiley face had like the little blood stain on it, you know. And I think that, you know, here we're really talking about, I don't know, the sun is associated with like yang energy, like the masculine energy, the active force. And so I think maybe this little blood drop is supposed to be kind of like the dark chaos that's like powering all of it, that's like underneath all of it. I think that's, I don't know, you'll see this little drop on yellow stuff like over and over and over again. It's just like the kernel of evil inside all the goodness that man creates in the world, you know? But so, and also I think it's really interesting, the guy who killed his kids has a Buddhist poster, you know? I mean, this guy is subscribing to philosophy and religion. It's less religion, more philosophy. Buddhism isn't like, it's not like Western religion. It's not the same. It doesn't have all these rules. It's very feminine. You know, it's a more feminine religion because it's just more philosophy. It's ideas. So he has this Buddha, and you have this big ass triangle in there. You have the circle, and also if you notice, it's in a poster form. So it's like, okay, so it's a rectangle, and that like a rectangle is like representative of the material plane. You know, like a form. Earth, you know, wind, fire, water, those four elements come together. And this is spirit. So it's like you have spirit inside of matter, you know, and that's what like ideas are. Like that's what our ideas are, is like these little spirits inside like the physical plane of our existence. And they affect things. And so you have, okay, also I love the Snoopy shoe. I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean, but that Snoopy shoe really creeped me out. I don't know if you guys noticed that. Also, there's this, this is the first day of the rest of your life poster. Like, there's all this, like, really, like, hippy-dippy shit, you know? But then this guy, like, this crazy hippie guy who's like, Grateful Dead, whatever, ends up, like, killing his fucking two kids. Like, wow, that's, like, some dark shit in a guy who's seemingly, like, pretty chill, you know? Like, that's pretty intense. And then right after that, we get this. So the news guy who's delivering all the news, he's got this symbol on where we have another triangle, and it's inside of a circle. And this guy is like, this news vendor talks about how he gets all of his information from the news and he's so plugged into everything. And so instead of worshiping like a religious philosophy, you know, like the idea of enlightenment or a Buddha or anything like that, he subscribes to the news. That's his religion. The religion is his news. He's a purveyor of those things. And so you have this guy who's like helping with that, and it's just like, again, it's like another thing where it's like, here's an idea that you can subscribe to, the news, you know, a lot of people subscribe to that. And you know what, the news is also an idea. It's an idea that we subscribe to. It isn't really reality. I mean, it kind of is, but it's also a lot of persuasion stuff. I mean, most of it is persuasion. It's trying to persuade you on an emotional level. It's not really about the news stories. It's like what they're trying to make you feel. And it's manipulative in that way, you know? And I think that a lot of us, like, I mean, you see your fucking feed. You go on there and you see all this depressing ass shit. And it's like, I mean, I'm not saying it's not happening and whatever, blah, 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 but I'm just saying, if you get bombarded with that, that's going to affect you and it's going to put you in a negative fucking zone. And when you're in a negative zone like that, it's just like, it takes away from everything. It's like you're lowering your vibrations, you know, it's like really fucked up. I have to be very careful with my news, you know, and be very detached when I view it and like view a lot of different sources, you know, and just like know that like all of this is like kind of poison. But then later on, this is so good. Oh my God. Hold on. Later on, we have the news. We go back to the newsstand and he's talking with this cabbie girl. And it's funny because we're talking about dualities, right? And so like this cabbie girl is a duality of this newsman. He's an old rugged news dude, you know. She's an old rugged cabbie lady, you know. Like she takes people places. He's stationary. She's not, you know. But that's the thing. He's a man. She's a woman. It's like they have these different, but they're also the same. Like she's like, oh, give me a hustler, you know. And I loved how they're talking about Pakistan, and it's like it's Pakistan that ought to worry. They're wide open, and she's like, well, we're all pretty vulnerable. And then she's looking at a naked lady in Hustler. Like that's like the definition of vulnerable is like being like naked on film and displaying yourself to like everybody in the world on a newsstand. Anybody wants to pick it up. And it's like all these vulnerabilities, you know. It's like, oh, Pakistan ought to worry. They're open. They're wide open. And it's like, it just talks about how war is like sex and how we're all interested in sex, but then we're all like, not understand, like misplacing these feelings and like putting them into these other fucked up things. I don't know, it's really fascinating. But this one in particular, where she gives him the poster that's like gay women against rape, GWAR. I like it, it's GWAR. And you have the pink triangle live, you have the Venus symbol for women, and you have her saying, you know, or he says, gay women against rape? This is a joke. Like, he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is absurd. And she's like, it's a benefit gig. Now you gonna nail it up or I'm gonna alter your looks, you know? And then over here, we have the Black Freighter. It's like, my raft grew increasingly grotesque, reflecting my own gradual transformation. And it's like, this guy's freaking out because it's like, he's just seeing like how warped everything is getting, and like she's a reflection of him, and then gay women against rape, like what does that even mean? Like it's just like fucking crazy. It's just like, and they're in a decline. They're in this like fascinating decline, and I think that that's what happens. You'll see this again and again in civilizations that decline, like including like Rome and shit, where it's like, well, when you get to this like certain point in your civilization, then like decadence kind of takes over, and then like gender starts falling apart, and then like things just get really weird until like things just completely fall apart, and then they start over again, and then there's like some new rules and some new bullshit going on. But I love this. I love that he begrudgingly put up the poster too. He's like, what, fuck, whatever, this is fucking stupid, but I'll put up your stupid poster, you know. It's so, I love the interaction between these two. They were really cracking me up. And another thing that's interesting about all these triangle posters that we see is they all have like ups, like right side up triangles, you know, they're all like right side up triangles. And a right side up triangle in alchemy is fire, which is like a masculine principle. A triangle this way is water, which is the feminine principle. And you have the Star of David, which is made of the masculine and the feminine principle. So you have water and fire like together. So this, you see a lot of like upside, like right side up triangles, you know, and it makes sense because fire also represents the yang sun masculine principle of like this, you know, this deal. And like, she's like, gay women against rape, like we're going to go out there. And it's like, yeah, of course these women are now empowered and they're taking on the masculine. Like this woman is so masculine. Like she's just as masculine as this guy is, you know, like just as much. Like things just get so weird. And then like she is embodying still in her own feminine way, this masculine ideal. I think it's just like, totally fascinating. Okay. Also, okay. But interestingly enough, we do have a giant fucking V in this, you know, like, okay, so now let's talk about Adrian Veidt. Adrian Veidt has been attacked. And we have this amazing splash, this 2-page splash. I love these 2 pages. They're so beautiful. And if you also if you notice, he's got a little drop right there on his yellow rose. Anyways, so he's like the upside down, like he's inverted. Like you see all of these people who are like, oh, they're all like, yes, we like this triangle. We like this triangle. And then for Veet, it's like his is like this upside down thing. And upside down is the feminine. It is and it's also water. And it's funny that he's like bashing this guy with water. And not only that, he has a fucking cup. Like whatever this thing is, it kind of looks like a cup, which is also another like element, symbol of water and like the feminine principle, like this feminine divine yin principle. It's just so good. I love it. I don't know. That's just what I think about it. I don't know exactly what Alan Moore means by it. I don't know. I'm speculating. There's a lot of speculation here. But it's a lot of fun. Also, something else that I found was really interesting to add to this like Buddhist duality karma idea issue is we have Gunga Diner. Okay. And so Gunga Diner is based off, as a pun on another poem called Gunga Din by, Kipling? And I'm like not the poetry person. I pretended to be in college for this one professor who like was into poetry, and I was like took poetry classes, but then after that I totally ditched and don't know anything else. Okay, so Gunga Diner, here we go. So, okay, there's this poem by this guy, and if you read it, it seems like super racist. Like it's pretty racist the way like if you read this. But it's supposed to be. And it's one thing that's really important to remember when reading this poem is that this guy is very specifically talking about racism by showing it in himself, and then at the end of this poem saying, this is wrong, you know? And so you have the story of this guy who is in the British military. He is stationed in India, and there is a water skin carrier, water boy, essentially. So an Indian water boy who works for them, who goes around and gives everybody water, you know, and everyone's always like talking shit to this kid. He's not a kid, he's like a man, but like everyone's always talking shit to him, thinking they're better than him, like, oh, everyone's always beating up on this guy, you know, where's my water? And like they're in a battle, and like at one point, like, so Gunga Din saves this particular soldier's life and drags him out of battle. And I think he's going back out there, and he's like giving water, like, and he gave this guy a sip of water. Like this guy was like, it was the grossest water. It was green and slimy, but it was the best water I ever tasted because I thought I was gonna die, and I just needed a thing of water. You know, this guy's like this water bearer, which is really interesting. And so, and that's also a loaded symbol, a water bearer. But at the end of this poem, and so right after that, Gunga Din gets killed, gets shot. And the guy is like talking to himself. He's like, you're a better man than I, Gunga Din. You know, like, even though we talked shit to you and said fucked up stuff and called you names and we're dicks to you, like, you're better than all of us. Like, you were better than all of us. Like, you are a sacred being, you know, and I am the piece of shit. Which I think is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And so you have, you know, Rorschach, who hangs out here all the time. You know, and I feel like Rorschach's kind of a Gunga Din. You know, he's a Gunga Din, where it's like, oh, you talk shit to him and you say he's gross and smelly and like you don't like him, but really like he's there and like when you need him, and like he's sacred little dude. You know, like he's a sacred little dude. So I love the Gunga Din thing going on there. And then also another Buddhist situation I saw. Actually, this is not Buddhist, but it's, what's the other one? The other Indian one? Ganesha, that's a part of Hindu. Okay, so I also noticed that Gunga Diner has a little elephant. Let's go to the book cam. Right. Okay. So Rorschach is like talking about over 40th Street, an elephant was drifting, you know, and so you have Gunga Diner that's like following him, but you have this Ganesha, this elephant Ganesha, and Ganesha is a remover of obstacles, you know, and so I feel like this elephant that's randomly floating over him is an omen, it's a portent of what is to happen to him, you know, this very night, because he is an obstacle who needs to be removed, just like Dr. Manhattan was a Gordian knot, you know, I think Rorschach is also kind of in that whole deal. So I love that. That's how I took this little guy, because that just seems like, come on, an elephant floating over his head. Like, why would you write that in there? Why would you? I mean, you could write anything in there. You chose to take a moment to talk about a floating elephant over his head. You know, I mean, like, you got to question these things, guys. You got to question these things. Also, if you notice in this issue, like, the words karma come up. Enlightenment, illumination, the whole thing ends with everything balances. So, yeah, I don't know. This shit gets really deep. Like, this shit gets so deep, like, it's crazy. So, let's see here. And I know that there was I saw a lot of you on Patreon, Joshua Brown and Rachel Roman, in particular, were asking about a lot of these triangles and the V's and things like that. So I hope I answered everybody's questions. I mean, that's just how I interpret it. This is one interpretation of many interpretations. You can choose to interpret it whatever way you want. But I do believe that Alan Moore, I know that he's steeped in the Western, tradition of esoterica and the occult. And all of these, like, this Western Kabbalistic whatever deal it's hard to talk about. It's fucking esoteric. That's why it's called esoteric. He knows about this shit. So it's like, you can learn this stuff. Like, you can go, like, look, alchemical symbols. What do they mean? Like, go Google it. Like, it'll be like triangle, fire, masculine principle. Like, and then you just have to remember these things. It's like flashcards. It's like learning a symbolic alphabet. And so, I'm a student of that symbolic alphabet. I'm not like a teacher of it by any means, but I can tell you what I see, and you can please take it though and go wherever else you want to go to with it. Okay. So, thanks Sluggo Wonder for subscribing. Really appreciate it. Okay. So at the end of this, I know I've gone like on way too long with this issue, but it was just like so much. Okay. At the end, we have, oh my God, this killed me. Okay. This was so good. The Treasure Island Treasury of Comic Supplemental was like one of my favorite supplementals so far. Like, this is so good. I hope you guys all read this. I really loved it. It is essentially a meta reality comics history lesson / self-fulfilling prophecy. It's crazy. Okay. So the Watchmen continuity in this book is a reflection of our own reality in 1985. Okay, so he's putting a lot of our own reality into this. Okay, but this is its own parallel universe, though. This is its own reality. Even though it's a reflection, there are things that are distorted. There are things that are backwards. There's inflections. So in this mirror, superheroes, because there were real superheroes that came out in the 40s. In this continuity. In the 50s, there was instead of the government coming along and fucking everything up for comics, they came along and they essentially gave it their blessing. They sanctioned comic books, which is the opposite of what actually happened in our reality. So we didn't have real superheroes that popped up. And but we did have this guy, Frederick Wortham, who wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, where he was blaming the decline that America was in at that time on the moral degradation. Our children, juvenile delinquents. That was such a buzzword. He was like this Dr. Phil who's using these buzzwords, juvenile delinquents, comic books are the scapegoat. All these EC comic books, these horror comic books, in particular, these crime comic books. These are our children, the children. And so he caused this panic, and parents freaked out. Mom started burning comics all over the place. There was comic burning parties. This is real. This is not a fiction. I'm telling you a real thing that happened in our world. And so there was a congressional hearing even about it. There was a congressional hearing where the EC Comics guy, the EC Comics brand, who did horror comics, had to go testify on the stand. He fucked the whole thing up. Like, he fucked up on the stand. He did a terrible job. He totally messed up and ended up like the government came down on them. And then you had the Comics Code Authority that came out, and you had to have all these new rules of what people could draw and what people couldn't draw and what they could say and what they couldn't say, It was really insane, and it killed EC comic books. But that's why superhero comic books became popular. Because before then, it wasn't superheroes. People didn't give, like, they were into it, okay, whatever, but, like, it was more about the horror crime comics, like, and the romance comics, like, not the romance. That was what was going on. But then, after that, since they couldn't do those anymore, they had to switch gears, so they're like, superheroes, superheroes. Okay, so back to this reality. So this reality, they had real superheroes, but then because of that, pirate comics took off. EC comic books was never destroyed. The Comics Code Authority never happened in this world. And like DC Comics is in this comic. Like in the Watchmen continuity, there is a DC comic brand that makes comic books. And they made the Tales of the Black Freighter. They published the Tales of the Black Freighter, and it was a huge jumping off point for them. Kind of like Detective Comics was for DC, like Batman. They had Detective Comics. This is their Elseworlds Detective Comics, Tales of the Black Freighter. And, okay, so, all right, back to our book cam. This guy is a real fucking guy, okay? This is Joe Orlando. He's a real artist. And even, okay, so this page, Joe Orlando did this page for them. He, like the actual artist in our reality, created a page for Tales of the Black Freighter to be featured in this article about him in an alternate parallel Watchmen universe drawing this comic book. So, and this is the only piece of art in here that is not drawn by Dan Gibbons or Dave Gibbons. This is it. Again, this is totally Joe Orlando. And because, okay, so Alan Moore had this like thing. He's like, oh, well, if superheroes never happened, then maybe pirate comics would have been big. And then if pirates comics were big, I think that this editor totally would have wanted to get Joe Orlando and like would woo him away, And so he wrote his own little fan fiction. He wrote his own comics history fan fiction, which is like so like crazy Alan Moore. Like that's so amazing. And also he mentions Gil Kane and Alex Toth in this, which were also real artists. Although I will say that the Max Shea character, the writer of the Tales of the Black Freighter, and also the Walt Feinberg, who starts drawing after Joe Orlando, those two are fictional. Those aren't real people. But I think that Max Shea is absolutely analogous to some degree to Alan Moore. I saw somebody asking me about that on Patreon. It's absolutely analogous. Like, and I think this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like this whole thing like turns into this weird self-fulfilling prophecy for him. Because Max Shea in this, like he starts, okay, hold on. This shit is so good. So, I gotta just read this here. The artist with harassing the artist with impossibly detailed panel descriptions and endless carping requests for revisions of artwork already drawn. I read that and I immediately was like, oh my God, Alan Moore is apologizing to Dave Gibbons with this right now, because he probably is a crazy person, and he's like, oh, can you just put this like fucking triangle over here? Like I need some more triangles in this bitch. And like Dave's having to go back. I thought that was really cute. But then, okay, so the writer of this comic self-destructs after, it goes to issue 31. Right now, the teen on the street is reading issues 23 and 24, which contains Marooned, which is part of the Best Of reprint collection. By the way, this kid is reading reprints. Like the Black Freighter Tales is an older comic that they're reprinting because it was so popular, much like they're doing now. I see Marvel and DC doing that right now in comic book stores where they're reprinting like old comics that did well, What are they called? The little Marvel masterpiece? What are they? They have some cute little title to them. And I've been picking them up. So it's like, they're like, oh, here's a big issue. We're going to reprint this. So it's like, I love that. But in issue 25, things start going bad. Max ends up quitting at some point. He disappears. And I love that, like, he quits because he wants to do, like, crazy stuff. Oh, by the way, here it is. True Believers. That's what they're, Marvel True Believers. They've been doing these reprints of like, oh, this is like the 1975 Giant Size X-Men. Are you interested in X-Men? Well, check this out. Oh, you want to know about the wedding of Jean Grey and Cyclops? Heard about that? Well, here you go, kids. Oh, you like X Factor, huh? Well, here's #1 issue. Check it out, kids. Check it out. So it's so funny because like Alan Moore's totally, you know, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening now. And it was happening, I'm sure it was happening then to some degree as well. But it's also like, not only is this a self-fulfilling prophecy because DC and Max Shea have a total falling out, and so does Alan Moore and DC. It's also interesting because it's like, by talking about Tales of the Black Freighter, like, there was another really meta thing in here that I was like, what? Where he was saying, like, even though, I think it was at the beginning, he's like, even though this is really popular now and people remember the Tales of the Black Freighter as this, like, big thing, it's important to remember that it was popular from the outset. It was popular from the outset. And that's also just like Watchmen. You know, Tales of the Black Freighter, in a way, is kind of like Watchmen. And he's also kind of predicting, like, how the Watchmen is like kind of a Tales of the Black Freighter for DC, you know? It's like, there's just so much meta fucking goodness in this. It's like really insane. But yeah, Max Shea has a falling out. Alan Moore has a falling out. And I love that it's over the fact that, okay, so for the Tales of the Black Freighter, he wants to do a thing where, so these pirates in this comic book continuity, he does all these different stories about different pirate scenarios, like, oh, you're drowning, or this guy who's been marooned. The one that we're reading right now is marooned. But it's an anthology series. They do all these different anthology things, but it's around the idea of, like, this Black Freighter thing, right? So he wanted to do a thing where he just started, like, showing what's inside the forbidden books, that the forbidden books that they have, the Black Freighter has taken away, you know, like when they attacked a ship that was going to the Vatican, and like they took these sacred books that like they're not supposed to have, that were going to be locked away in the vaults, you know. And so he pitches this idea of him wanting to do things from these fictional books in this fictional universe, like of these arcane tomes, you know. And it says he had 5 pitches, and 4 of the 5 of them were described as blatantly pornographic and were rejected by DC, which brought about the argument in which Shea quit the book and comics as well, going on to write such classic novels as the twice-filmed Fog Dancing. And it was just like, oh, Alan, you really wrote yourself into that one, bro. Like, you totally wrote your own falling out with DC while everything was good with DC, and then it ended up, like, coming true. Like, how crazy is that? Like, that's so funny. Although he didn't disappear, but he is a fucking hermit. I mean, like, he's around, but he's not online and shit. Like, he's like, fuck that. Okay. So that's it for issue 5. I know that was, like, crazy long.